and welcome to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiegue, live today on Monday, May 27th. A quarterback-heavy episode today on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. We're going to start off with our regular rankings of the quarterbacks, this time finishing our journey on the AFC West division. Then we'll transition into a different topic. Then later on in the show, we'll talk about Brandon Ayuk and more developments on his contract situation, maybe a asking price range that we can finally target based on the recent reports, and also talking about Aaron Rodgers and how he has stuck up for his offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett. He's been the target of some recent reports about his job security and whatnot, so we're going to get into all of that and what Aaron Rodgers had to say on the topic. All of that coming up on today's show. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. And before I jump into the rankings, I want to remind you guys, if you have any questions or comments you want to make, please use the tip and donations link you see on your screen, gsmcpodcast.net. By using this, I can read your question on air and that way get your guys' perspective or just point of view on anything I say or any other topics on hand on today's show. It's a massive help for this show, and also we greatly appreciate it anytime you guys are able to use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net. But in saying that, we can jump right into the rankings, finishing off our quarterback portion of the series at the AFC West, the last one on our journey. A pretty straightforward ranking, so I'll jump right into it. Starting off at number 4 on our rankings, we have a rookie, Bo Nix, at number 4. Why Bo Nix? Well, I know it's supposed to be a quarterback battle per se between Zach Wilson, Bo Nix, and Jarrett Stidham, but Bo Nix was picked this year as the 12th overall quarterback. So with that being said, I think there's been more put on his plate and just more attention brought onto him to be that starter. If you're going to pick him that early, he has to be, I would imagine, the starter or the favorite to start at this point of the offseason. Has more experience now entering the NFL, the most experience out of any rookie quarterback, I'm pretty sure, entering the NFL. After 5 years at college, he is 24 years old. Oddly enough, the same age as Zach Wilson. He came into the league at 22 years old. So different levels of experience. Zach Wilson having more experience at one level, but maybe not as successful as Bo Nix. More time in college, but a little bit more successful than Zach Wilson in that time period. To round off his college career, at Oregon, probably his best season at the college level, 77 completion percentage, over 4,500 yards, and 45 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. As efficient it could get, and to quote Sean Payton, talking about Bo Nix at this point of the offseason, he said he is further along than most rookie quarterbacks he has seen, or just in general, up to this point. So that's a positive thing for Bo Nix. But, the main thing with him, I think he's shown tremendous development since his time at Auburn in the SEC, then going over to Oregon. I think he depended a lot more on his athleticism and running and sort of these panic runs that I've labeled it now, where you feel some sort of pressure quickly and you just decide to run and don't really scan the field for more options. You just tuck it and run it, or maybe just walk right into a sack because you don't really evaluate what's out there, even with some pressure in your face. I think he's gotten a lot better at that. And also, in terms of his ability, athletic ability, I should say, he is pretty sneakily quick and athletic for Bo Nix. I think that's something that hasn't been pointed out too much. When he can run, he is pretty fast, and I think he'll bring that to the Denver Broncos. And just to round it off here, with the state of where the Denver Broncos are right now, not to say that they don't have nothing to lose, but they don't have nothing to lose, really. With the state of this team, last year they finished 8-9, and to somehow think you're going to get better than that with the team that you have right now, you still have some crucial pieces left over, as in Cortland Sutton, Javonte Williams is still there, and just defensively, Pat Surtain is also still there. You still have some core pieces in your facility. Now you're trying to determine who the quarterback is. You might not get the same level, obviously, with Russell Wilson being there and all his experience. But if you get anywhere close to 8 and 9, and Bo Nix is able to perform decently to get close to 8 and 9 or anywhere near that, or even better than that, I think would be exceeding so many expectations that I have him at number 4 just because he is a rookie. I expect him to be the starter, and he fills in at the 4th overall spot. Then at number 3, another one that, is a bit of a question mark just because Gardner Minshew, is he the starter right now? If I were to make the decision today, I would probably go with Gardner Minshew. 28 years old, has been in very different situations with the Colts, with the Jaguars. He was with the Eagles as well. So he has seen different schemes, concepts, and it's been around a lot of different environments that I think could help him in adapting to another new environment there with the Las Vegas Raiders. And it is the safer option. You could go with Aidan O'Connell. He showed some flashes last year with some big games. He was the quarterback of their game where they beat the Chiefs, so some people might not put as much stock into that, but I think there has to be something to be said for that performance as well. Everybody contributed to that, so that's one thing you can point to in Aidan O'Connell's case, but I think Gardner Minshew would probably end up for me being my choice. I think you could do more with Minshew because of his exposure to other different scenarios around the NFL. He's been around different coaches and stuff like that, like I mentioned, so to adapt to something new here with the Las Vegas Raiders, I think would suit him very well. And he may not have the most routine displayed arm in the league. He doesn't consistently make wow throws, but there is that term you always hear announcers make on games when Gardner Minshew makes a play, Minshew magic. He sometimes creates something out of nothing, and I think if he could do that here or there with the Las Vegas Raiders, I think it'll go a long way for them. And also, on that topic, similarly, creating those magical sort of plays, extending plays, I think it'll be a lot easier here for Gardner Minshew because compared to what he had with the Colts, an exciting team, a young team with some good players, but here in Las Vegas you have Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers, Jalen Guyton, Michael Gallup, Michael Mayer as well. You have some more options here where I don't think the onus is going to be on Gardner Minshew to carry them. I think more of that is going to be on these skilled players. And credit to the Las Vegas for filling up this roster for Gardner Minshew, or whoever ends up being the quarterback, to give them as many options as they can, to not have so much pressure on them to perform. I think this is a good recipe for Minshew, and for the Raiders overall, it's a long-term project. Gardner Minshew is not going to be the long-term quarterback. So with that being said, I think he could do enough this year just to get by, and maybe next year you get your guy. But for right now, Gardner Minshew is the number 3 ranked quarterback in the AFC West. Then moving on to number 2, Justin Herbert. Weird spot with Justin Herbert. Not in terms of my rankings, but where he finds himself in his career right now. I am a big fan of Justin Herbert from his time coming into the league and what he's been able to do early on. He had early success very much with this Chargers team, and fairly, he was tasked with carrying much of the pressure and much of the responsibility for them to win at an early stage of his career. He did very well with it. He excelled at doing it. I'm sure he didn't really think about it too much, just going out there and playing, but I think as more of the season started to pile up, he sort of, not to say that he became tired of it, but having that always be on your shoulders, I think can get to a point where opposing defenses just sort of find a way to corral you a little bit more, put some more pressure on you. Of course, he still had the talent, but I think more teams made it a lot harder for him to perform, and at this point in his career, he hasn't had the accolades or the national spotlight on him too much. He's only made one playoff appearance one time, and it was that bad performance he had against the Jacksonville Jaguars where they gave up that massive lead that they built up in the second half. So not a good last impression in the playoffs. He's the type of talent that you'd think he'd always be there, but he was really forced to carry this team since his rookie year, and now he is 26 years old and enters a new period with the Chargers where Jim Harbaugh comes in, and they're trying to change this sort of style that they have going with this team. not as many eye-catching names on the offensive side of the ball, with Keenan Allen moving on, Austin Eckler moving on, Gerald Everett as well. They've really stripped down this offense, and I think, one, it's a good thing for Jim Harbaugh to just come in with the players he wants, but obviously it's going to take some time to establish itself with Justin Herbert. I think he has all the other talents you need, the arm, the size, the athletic ability. Now he just really needs to stockpile that resume a little bit better to elevate himself back into that conversation with the Joe Burrows, with the Lamars, and get back to the playoffs and perform at that stage. I think he has a good chance of doing it, but there's definitely going to be some hiccups along the way. But he is number 2, and obviously the number 1 quarterback in this division and probably the entire NFL, Patrick Mahomes. Not too much to say about him, honestly. What more can I say to validate, I guess, why he's number 1? He's probably number 1 on a lot of people's quarterback rankings just in general. Multiple-time MVPs, multiple Super Bowl MVPs, all pros, 3-time Super Bowl champion. This guy just stockpiles these records, and more often than not now, I think he is just trying to get that team success. And with the team that they have built up now, the offense looks a bit more balanced to me. How the Rashee Rice situation plays itself out, I think, will be huge, but they've done a good job of bringing in Marquise Brown, drafting Xavier Worthy, getting those guys acclimated to this team. I don't think will be very hard, to be quite honest with you. I expect them to be just as efficient, if not more efficient, this year after a rough period last year where they had some flashes of looking like the Chiefs towards the end, but sometime in the beginning they had their hiccups. I don't think we're going to see that too often this year. They have a difficult schedule, but I still expect them to be one of the top-ranked teams in the AFC, and Patrick Mahomes will be a catalyst for that. He is the game changer. He is why they win games. He embraces that pressure, and that is why he is the number 1 ranked quarterback in this division and in the entire NFL. So that's my list. Let me know what you guys think about it in the live chat box or in the comments afterwards. Not too hard compared to other divisions, but that'll do it for this segment and the quarterback series somewhat. We'll be changing topics in later episodes, but for now, we're going to go to a quick break, and when we come back, more on Brandon Ayuk's contract situation. A price range has sort of been laid out there for the 49ers and around the NFL. Is that a fair price for Brandon Ayuk? We'll discuss it when we come back. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to get into a new segment here around Brandon Ayuk and what his contract situation is sort of looking like with the San Francisco 49ers. There's been a lot of talk recently, not that much movement, but up until now, it's been pretty just bare right now in terms of the news coming out on Brandon Ayuk. But for right now, on Friday, some more development on this topic. On ESPN's recent episode of NFL Live last week on Friday, ESPN's Jeremy Fowler revealed a possible target price for Brandon Ayuk, and it has to do somewhat with who you see on your screen. Amon-Ra St. Brown telling the crew there on the NFL Live, in his words, that San Francisco with Brandon Ayuk, they have been talking, they have been negotiating, nothing imminent as of yet, but there's a certain chance that this could happen. I was told the benchmark here is Amon-Ra St. Brown because he got $28 million per year on a 4-year deal from Detroit. The goal, as it appears, is for Brandon Ayuk to try and beat that, according to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler. And so we kind of got a parameter of what this deal could sort of look like, what Brandon Ayuk is trying to achieve here. Because up to this point, honestly, I feel like nobody really knew where these things stand. You know, Brandon Ayuk's been sort of cryptic online, has unfollowed the team, has posted stuff on his story, but his manager and himself have stressed that they haven't requested a trade, so it's still pretty much in a gray area. Now we kind of get a bit more clarity as to posing some more hard-hitting questions around this. You know, the main one for me is Brandon Ayuk a $30 million wide receiver? And with Amon-Ra St. Brown being brought up here in Jeremy Fowler's report, is he worth more than that contract that Amon-Ra St. Brown brought? Well, if you look at the numbers where we're going to start off, Amon-Ra St. Brown signed that 4-year, $120 million deal on April 24th. He was actually, funny enough, the highest paid receiver at one point before a day or two, and then A.J. Brown took that mantle from him, which was pretty just funny how the timing worked out there. I never expected A.J. Brown to get that new deal when he did, but A.J. Brown now currently holds that title at $32 million per year. But St. Brown is also up there among the very lucratively paid wide receivers. And in saying that, you look at the season Amon-Ra St. Brown had in 2023 to sort of begin to compare these two players. In 2023, Amon-Ra St. Brown was voted to the first team All-Pro, the first time he was selected for that team. He finished with 10 touchdowns, 1,515 yards, 119 receptions, and 119 receptions. Tied for second in yards, third in touchdowns scored, and also that's where he ranked in the NFL in just those categories. Pretty eye-popping and very wide receiver-esque numbers for Amon-Ra St. Brown there. And then very good numbers, and just based on that, you know, statistical evaluation of Amon-Ra St. Brown, now you kind of get a look at Brandon Ayuk and what he did in 2023. A bit of a just decline in some of those numbers. Brandon Ayuk, 7 touchdowns, second team All-Pro in 2023, 1,342 yards, which was 7th in the NFL, and 75 receptions as well, on 59 fewer targets than Amon-Ra St. Brown. So a bit of a context there for you guys, just looking at these two players, getting an idea of how these numbers sort of play out. You know, the numbers are one thing, but also why these numbers are the way that they are. Not that Brandon Ayuk had bad numbers. You know, those are very good for Brandon Ayuk, that I think has slowly grown into more of a maybe fringe wide receiver one at this point. You know, for me, I would like to see more of these sort of seasons stacked up for him, but Jeremy Fowler continued on in his report and stressed that Brandon Ayuk is not looking to be the highest paid receiver, but he feels that he's done enough at this point to earn around that $30 million mark in his contract. And the 49ers, looking at their options now, it's not necessarily do this number, give me this number, or move on, because they do have the option of franchise tagging him in 2025. He'll be a free agent, so that option will be available for the 49ers. And now you kind of look at these two a little bit closer, and Ayuk in the last 2 years has eclipsed 60 receptions for the first time, compared to his first 2 years where he was under that 60 reception mark to start his NFL career. And also, he, in his last 2 seasons, also just eclipsed 1,000 yards also for the first time these last 2 seasons compared to his first 2. And also, his touchdowns have jumped as well. In his first 2 years, he scored only 5 touchdowns in both his first and second year. Then, The last 2 years, he has exceeded that with 7, and I want to say 8 touchdowns the year before that. So a slow development for Brandon Ayuk. His first 2 years, feeling him out a little bit, trying to determine what kind of player you're going to get. Then recently, the last 2 years, he has grown more into that type of player that I think he sees himself as, and that the 49ers are very happy with. I'm sure to have him, Debo, George Kittle, and Christian McCaffrey all there under the same team there for him as well. And now you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown, similarly to Brandon Ayuk, over their career period, over that span of how long each of them have been in the NFL. Amon-Ra St. Brown has been a bit more involved, I guess I would say, earlier on than Brandon Ayuk with the Detroit Lions. 90 receptions minimum in each of the 3 seasons he has been in the NFL, so that has exceeded the amount of receptions Ayuk has at 60 minimum. Amon-Ra St. Brown has had no less than 90 in each year that he's been in the NFL, so that's one thing that sort of gives them the upper hand there. Then also, it is important to point out that Amon-Ra St. Brown has received a lot more targets than Brandon Ayuk, and I'll touch more on that point in just a little bit. But he also has had no less than 900 yards in either of his 3 seasons as well, whereas Brandon Ayuk sort of flirted around the 500s to 700 range in his first 2 years. Then he made that jump to the 1,000-yard mark in the last 2 years. So again, maybe more consistency with Amon-Ra St. Brown since he got into the league compared to Brandon Ayuk. But right now it seems like they're both almost at the same level. That's where the biggest point comes up for me with this whole situation with the 2 receivers and sort of comparing both of them. The biggest disclaimer really is just the role each of them serve with their respective team. The amount of talent that each of the teams have at their disposal, I think, plays into some of these numbers and some of the reasonings behind you might get some of these numbers and why some people might hold Amon-Ra St. Brown a little bit higher, at least I do, than Brandon Ayuk at this moment. The Lions, at their disposal, at the top of their talent pool, skill player position roles as of right now, Amon-Ra St. Brown's probably at the top of that list. Then you follow that up with maybe Sam Laporta, then maybe Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. The most talented and the number one guy you want with the ball at his hands would be Amon-Ra St. Brown to the Lions, compared to what the situation is like in San Francisco, where you have Brandon Ayuk, and he might be second on that list compared to, or actually he might even be third on that list if you look at Christian McCaffrey, who had a tremendous season last year. He gets the ball a ton. Then you have Debo, who not only catches passes as well as Brandon Ayuk, but he gets the ball handed off to him as well. So that's another thing that might elevate him a little bit more than Ayuk. Then you get to Brandon Ayuk based on the trajectory that he's been going at. Then you still have George Kittle as well to throw the ball to. Kyle Juszczyk as well. I'll throw him in there and how often the 49ers use them. There's a lot more variety on the 49ers team, and there's a lot more targets to share among more people than there is the Detroit Lions. So that's one of the main reasons why Amon-Ra might have the better numbers, might have the more chance to prove himself more often than not than Brandon Ayuk. Not to say that Amon-Ra is a bad player. I think he's slowly growing into one of the best in the league, but the chance that he's had to prove himself and show his abilities, I think, has been greater than that of Brandon Ayuk. And the cap situation, when you're talking about this amount of money for Ayuk, is a big factor, especially if they feel that Juwan Jennings and their rookie that they just drafted, Ricky Pearsall, could be similar. If both of them can sort of produce similar numbers to Brandon Ayuk, and they're obviously cheaper, maybe the 49ers, if Brandon Ayuk won't move off of that $30 million mark, maybe they'll start to consider moving Brandon Ayuk on if they think these two guys can sort of produce what Ayuk can do together. Maybe we can get some better return for Brandon Ayuk if we trade him somewhere else and get something at least out of him rather than losing him in free agency. That's one way the 49ers can look at this. Also, say they try and keep Ayuk and also Brock Purdy, who they have to pay eventually in the future when his contract is due. Both of them, if they try and keep both of them, how does that sort of set off the rest of the team, because both of them, they are looking for big numbers in their respective markets. And right now, the 49ers are projected to be, I want to say, $23.9 million over the salary cap in 2025. So that's also something else. If you want to pay Brock Purdy around $50 million, where the quarterback market is of right now, and you're going to be over the cap, and you want to try and keep Brandon Ayuk at that $30 million price range that is reported, how is the rest of the team going to look? Because Juwan Jennings is also looking for a new contract. He could move on. He is a restricted free agent, so different rules apply to him. But, that is a lot of asking out of the rest of the team if you're going to allocate so much money to Ayuk and Brock Purdy, plus all the money you have to McCaffrey as the highest paid running back, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel. Can that all fit in the books, and you still have this great juggernaut team that you've been able to field for the recent seasons in the NFL to have so much success that you've had? I think is a serious question. And overall, just to close out this segment and sort of give my feelings on Brandon Ayuk, really, I would honestly feel a lot better if I could see one more year out of these sort of numbers that Brandon Ayuk has produced, because right now I'm seeing the slow development, and it looks like he is getting there. This is really the first year where he's put up legit wide receiver 1 numbers, so he has proven it, but is it going to be consistent? Can he do it for at least 2 years? Can I at least get 2 years out of him? That's really where I would feel safer giving him this amount of money. If he stacks up this year and puts up better or at least the same numbers next year, I would feel more comfortable giving him that money if I could see it out of him one more year. But then at that point, if you wait it out and play out his contract, he will be a free agent. Of course, you can franchise tag him, but eventually, when you do want to pay him, he could be a bit more expensive than that $30 million per year mark. So that's something the 49ers have to consider. By waiting and really seeing the value Brandon Ayuk has, it could end up costing them more than taking the gamble on him right now. So we at least got some clarity of where this situation is sort of heading, but honestly, I don't think it made it any easier for the 49ers and for anybody to make the determination. But let me know what you guys think. Would you guys give this amount of money to Brandon Ayuk, or potentially try and get something out of him through a trade or some sort of deal like that? But in saying that, we will move on with the rest of the show. We're going to get into another break right here real fast, and when we come back, talking about Aaron Rodgers and his offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett. It didn't look great last year, but Aaron Rodgers is emphasizing for more trust in him and Nathaniel Hackett. I'll give you the reasons why he wants more trust in them for the New York Jets. A lot of pressure on the Jets coming up, so Aaron Rodgers is going all in on Nathaniel Hackett, and why that is, I'll provide those reasons in just a few seconds. Don't go anywhere.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Moving right along with the show and into our next topic, more on the New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers, specifically in relation to their offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett. What is going on with him? We talked about Nathaniel Hackett recently. I want to say maybe about 2 weeks ago, and the reports coming from SNY that the New York Jets had been looking for someone to come in and essentially try and replace Nathaniel Hackett, or at least take the play calling responsibilities away from him, all stemming from the sort of season that they had last year. You know, it wasn't great, obviously, because Aaron Rodgers went out, but after that, with an offensive coordinator, I'm sure most people have the idea in their mind that once someone goes down, any capable offensive coordinator would be able to maneuver their game plan, change the strategy around a little bit to fit what players are available to him at that moment. Obviously, that was Zach Wilson, and that was one of the biggest criticisms, that Nathaniel Hackett really didn't try too hard to change his way of calling plays, that it was so tailor-made for Aaron Rodgers that once Zach Wilson came in there, it looked like it did last year. And I'm not saying that his responsibility is to make Zach Wilson look like Aaron Rodgers with this offensive system that he tries to change to Zach Wilson, but, you have all the reports coming out of the play calling. You have Mecole Hardman also touching on this situation when he was with the New York Jets on the Pivot podcast and saying that once Aaron Rodgers went down, in his words, he felt that the team had no direction. There was no leadership coming from the offensive play calling. So you have those comments, and now these reports also sort of show some truth maybe to what Mecole Hardman said and how that leaves Nathaniel Hackett in terms of play calling. There was a lot of scrutiny heading into this offseason about his job security, and last week reporters also asked Nathaniel Hackett on these reports, and he addressed them a little bit and said that he does believe that he has the confidence of Robert Saleh and the team to be the offensive coordinator, and also mentioned that there were some conversations had and that everything's been addressed, apparently, according to Nathaniel Hackett. No specifics on what has been addressed specifically, but he is aware of the New York Jets' conversations with other potential candidates for offensive coordinator positions. So, he stayed pretty, general about it. He didn't go into too many specifics, but the biggest thing for me that he said was that he felt that he had the confidence of Robert Saleh and the New York Jets team, and how you take that and determine that. I'll get into that in just a few seconds, but the topic at hand now is Aaron Rodgers. What does Aaron Rodgers feel about this? How does he view this whole situation? Because he is getting the play calls from Nathaniel Hackett, and Rodgers explained why fans should feel good about Nathaniel Hackett at this point running the offense and why he has so much confidence in him. He said, "You should trust me, and I trust Nathaniel Hackett." So, to me, that's the end of story. There's been a lot of BS that's been said out there. There's a lot of things that have gone on the last couple of years that he's dealt with that I think pretty professionally, and he also stressed that their relationship, to trust their relationship that he has with Nathaniel Hackett and the rest of the staff. And it is important to point out, Aaron Rodgers obviously had Nathaniel Hackett in his time with the Green Bay Packers. Then in that whole offseason where Rodgers was definitely leaving the Packers where he wanted to sign, the Jets brought in Nathaniel Hackett to be their offensive coordinator in a ploy, wanting to get Aaron Rodgers to join because they had their offensive coordinator there. That is just a strategic way of going about it. They'll say that that wasn't their intention, but it is what it is now. Aaron Rodgers joined, and now they're again running similar offense that they did in Green Bay, continuing on with that relationship. And although Aaron Rodgers said that to ESPN, he also did mention that in a recent development to their offense, that Robert Saleh is now becoming more involved on the offensive side of the ball. And why that's sort of eye-catching is because Robert Saleh was hired to be the head coach as a defensive specialist coach. He came from being the defensive coordinator with the San Francisco 49ers. He got the Jets job. So to say he's being more involved in the offense could be a little confusing, just because you might not think he has too much expertise in that field. But Aaron Rodgers commented on that and confirmed those rumors of Robert Saleh by saying, as a defensive coach, he's been in that room a lot. But he's been kind of sitting over the left of me a good amount of the offseason so far, so we appreciate his influence. He's brought some really good ideas to the table. He's added a lot of interesting stuff that you'll see throughout the OTAs and in training camp. Like I mentioned, it doesn't follow the traditional sort of path that the head coach takes when he's hired, from what field he's hired. For Robert Saleh now to be more involved in the offense, I think goes back to that point of Nathaniel Hackett that I mentioned before, in him feeling the confidence of Robert Saleh and the New York Jets organization. Well, now you have this development where Robert Saleh is more involved in the offense, and not that it directly contradicts what Nathaniel Hackett is feeling, the full confidence of Robert Saleh and the New York Jets. I think that might be where this could be viewed a little bit differently. If you had the full confidence, I don't think the head coach would want to get involved on the offensive play calling, especially like I mentioned, if Robert Saleh is a defensive guy. There's no reason, realistically, if you have a lot of trust in your offensive coordinator, for you to really be putting your input into that sort of field, especially when you have a guy like Aaron Rodgers as well. All the experience he has, all the knowledge and just wherewithal that he does have as the quarterback, as a very talented quarterback with a lot of success in his career. You have those two guys in that room. You would probably feel pretty confident about those guys fully running the offense, but now Robert Saleh is getting more involved in it. So right now I'm having a little bit of thoughts as to, what do they really feel about Nathaniel Hackett? And with Robert Saleh becoming more involved, I think that sort of gives you an inclination as to where this is sort of pushing, especially because of all the pressure mounted now on the New York Jets. Last season, they were supposed to be the Super Bowl contenders. Aaron Rodgers gets hurt. You missed out on a great opportunity last year. Now this year, they get all those primetime games. Everybody wants to see them and view them as Super Bowl contenders because they got a lot better. And with that, I don't think it's a secret now at this point that if this whole operation sort of blows up in their face and they don't get the best version of Rodgers, or he gets hurt again and the rest of the team looks pretty bad as they did last year. Aaron Rodgers even said it, he said if he doesn't perform as well as he has been or is capable of, all of them are probably, getting shown the exit door at the end of the season. So he has acknowledged that pressure. Everybody else is no stranger to it as well with the New York Jets. So that also has something to do with this whole situation playing into it. I'm sure Robert Saleh, after being there for 3 years, sort of feels that pressure as well. Like Aaron Rodgers said, they're all going to be out of there if they don't perform up to the level that is expected of them. So in his best efforts to try and avoid that, he'll get more involved in the offense and really make sure they're doing everything to his liking to really get success out there on the field. And in terms of Aaron Rodgers' relationship with Nathaniel Hackett, and does he really trust Nathaniel Hackett and their relationship? I believe that Aaron Rodgers trusts Nathaniel Hackett's willingness to allow Aaron Rodgers to change the play and interpret a play call to the best of his ability. That relationship that they have, I think, is very strong, and there's a lot of trust in that. So with an offensive coordinator, sometimes if they're really hard bent on their play call, on their philosophy, they're not going to take any quarterback really, other than I guess Aaron Rodgers realistically. But most quarterbacks, if they're trying to change the play call, the offensive coordinator will not like that and will want to stick to his game plan. And I think Nathaniel Hackett and his willingness to allow Aaron Rodgers the freedom to maneuver and change the play, audible to something completely different. That sort of trust, I think Aaron Rodgers really appreciates it, and having that good relationship is something that really suits them both. Because say the Jets brought in somebody completely different this year, a more established offensive coordinator with more, stricter philosophies and concepts that he wanted to stick with and was really a believer in. If Aaron Rodgers came in there and tried to change it, audible to it, and really just throw the game plan out the window, those two guys would have probably butted heads, and that would have benefited nobody. So I think this was probably the best scenario for the Jets to try and get the best out of Aaron Rodgers, to keep him happy and just to keep the harmony around the entire organization, because the last thing you need is something like that really getting in the way of football. And that relationship, how it pans out, we're going to finally see it hopefully throughout the entire regular season this year in 2024. If Aaron Rodgers stays healthy, we'll really see if it was a good decision to keep Nathaniel Hackett and to see where Aaron Rodgers is physically, how he's moving out there. He's looking so far so good in OTAs, but obviously the regular season is a different animal. And now, with the impact of the pressure, with all those primetime games, how does that also affect them? I think it will take a toll on them, but we'll see how they execute it in the regular season. But that's where it stands in terms of Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers, where they're feeling this offseason. But in the meantime, we're going to continue on with the rest of the show. A couple more topics to talk about on today's episode. 2 more quarterback topics on one, Zach Wilson getting acclimated to his new team on the Denver Broncos and what he had to say on the whole transition from the Jets to his new team. And also Trey Lance getting ready for a pretty big offseason this year, a full offseason with the Dallas Cowboys, what he has to say about it, and what this long-term plan could look like with Trey Lance if Dak Prescott maybe decides to move on in 2025. Those 2 stories are coming up in just a few seconds. We'll be right back on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
We are back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, and before I get into the next topic, I want to remind you guys one last time, if you have any questions or comments you want to make, use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net, that you see on your screen. That way I can read your question pop up in the chat box and read it on air and get your guys' perspective on anything I say or on any of the topics on hand. It's a massive help for this show, and we greatly appreciate it anytime you guys are able to do that. So again, the tip and donations link is gsmcpodcast.net. And in saying that, moving on to another quarterback topic, Zach Wilson and his time now as one of the potential candidates for the Denver Broncos starting quarterback position. Looking overall at Zach Wilson, not the smoothest of rides in the NFL so far. He was drafted number 2 in 2021 as a 22-year-old to come into that situation and was sort of forced to start with a very poor New York Jets team. I think sort of stunted his development, in my opinion, to just be thrown out there and also to expect to perform at a high level and carry the New York Jets at that point with the amount of talent he might have been evaluated as having when he came out in 2021. I think it was way too early for Zach Wilson, just where he was at that point of a quarterback and how developed he really was. To throw him out there and just expect results, I think was a mistake. And that's sort of where you get the result that you do with Zach Wilson and his time with the Jets. 12 wins in 34 appearances overall for the Jets, 57% completion percentage, over 6,000 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 25 interceptions, and 17 fumbles as well as the quarterback for the New York Jets. Not a very good start to your NFL career, but again, he might not have been great and not doing enough on his part really to validate being drafted number 2 overall, but as well, I think the Jets are just as responsible in how all of that played out. But now, Zach Wilson has a new opportunity to start fresh, really, at 24 years old still. He still has some years to really grow, and I think there's a good opportunity now for Zach Wilson with the Denver Broncos. He was traded there this offseason, and now he's in a full-blown quarterback competition with Jarrett Stidham and rookie Bo Nix. Wilson has been at OTAs so far in the offseason period for the Broncos starting last week, as well as with the other quarterbacks. And Sean Payton has said right now that, they're all pretty much at an even playing field, that they're all splitting the reps so far between all of them, won't make any early determinations at this point, probably not until mini camp or maybe even training camp if Sean Payton views it that way. But Zach Wilson spoke at OTAs last week and said that, it was pretty much bittersweet the way it all panned out with the New York Jets, but he is ready for a fresh start now and a new challenge, and really has acknowledged the up and downs of his time in New York, but feels that he's been able to learn from it, which is pretty much all Zach Wilson can do right now. And he's excited to learn under Sean Payton. He stressed that in one of his statements that he said at OTAs, which was, Sean Payton, he's done a phenomenal job for as long as I can remember. I loved watching him and Drew and the efficiency they played with, how consistent it was, and how explosive they were during their time there, obviously, in New Orleans. It's something to point out and something worth noting. With this whole situation now around Zach Wilson, the question is, how likely is it for him to start now and be that number one quarterback for the Denver Broncos? Well, looking back a little bit now again to his time with the New York Jets, Wilson was drafted by Robert Saleh. He got the job in January of 2021 leading up to the draft. So he had gone through all the process of trying to find the quarterback that he wanted. They landed on Zach Wilson. So he was the guy chosen by Robert Saleh. But Saleh was just starting as a new head coach, like I mentioned, and was really embarking on this whole new journey, this new Pandora's box of things that he couldn't have been expecting as a new head coach. And you look at that situation compared to what you have with Sean Payton, and it's really pretty much night and day. You have someone just becoming a head coach, and now you get to work under somebody that's been a very successful head coach a few seasons ago now. Maybe not so much with the Broncos, but with his time in the Saints, like Wilson pointed out, they were very successful, and learning under Sean Payton, I can only see as a positive thing for Zach Wilson, still, like I mentioned, as a 24-year-old. And also, you look at the roster in New York that Zach Wilson had. It wasn't great. At the wide receiver positions, you had, at that time, Elijah Moore, Corey Davis as probably the best ones. Then Michael Carter as the starting running back in 2024 for his first year. So a lot of pressure was put on Zach Wilson right off the bat. Then in 2022, you bring in Garrett Wilson, you bring in Breece Hall, and it looks a little bit better from those positions, but the O-line was still nowhere near where it needed to be. All that playing into Zach Wilson really not being put in the best position to succeed in New York. Now, you bring him over to Denver, there's more experience there. Maybe you have Courtland Sutton, depending on how that situation plays out, but essentially, Zach Wilson now is in a better spot to maybe handle more responsibility with a lesser skill-based positional group around him than he was at 22 years old, just trying to figure out how to start his career. That's another point I wanted to make. It also a lot of change and a lot of moving pieces and poor level of support, a lot of pressure and scrutiny, especially in New York with that market. I think it was just too heavy on Zach Wilson in his time with New York, and now you transition to Denver again, and I just think the fans in the market is pretty different, and it does play a different role, because in New York, I think, even if the fans know that the team might not be good, there's still always a lot of criticism that the players get, and just a lot of blame that fans want to put on players when they don't perform, whereas in Denver, the market and the intensity you get in Denver, I think is different, because if the team's not doing very well, I don't think the expectations were ever there, especially where the team has been in recent seasons. So the amount of criticism and just heat he might get on the backside if he still doesn't perform here, I don't think will be as intense as it is in New York, because of the market size difference there as well. And now you're in a very even playing field, I think, with Jarrett Stidham and Bo Nix, where Bo Nix, like I mentioned before at the start of this whole episode, he is probably the favorite to start right now, but coming in at 24 years old, it is an even playing field now, I think, which is the biggest thing about it all, because you have Jarrett Stidham, has been moved around the NFL a while. Bo Nix coming in also as a 24-year-old. The lower expectations as well for the Broncos could just make it easier for all these guys, but it is a lot more even for Zach Wilson. It really is looked upon, at least in my opinion, as not the last opportunity, but the best chance that Zach Wilson now has to prove it, that he has it in him to be that starting quarterback, because where else are you going to find such even circumstances where he could come in and say, I have as good a chance to start as a rookie, and Jarrett Stidham, who hasn't been a starter, I don't think a pronounced starter in the NFL throughout his whole career. This is a good chance for him to finally be that quarterback, and if it doesn't pan out for him, maybe he was never supposed to be that number one quarterback on a roster, but that's still all to play out, and that is still all to be seen. But right now, it is the best chance that he has with a roster that doesn't have too much to lose, so he can go out there and try things. And if it doesn't work out, maybe, like I said, it wasn't meant to be. So that all will be interesting to follow throughout the rest of the offseason. And who ends up winning that quarterback battle will be one thing. And if they stay the quarterback throughout the rest of the season, I think will also be another intriguing story. But that's all from that standpoint and the Denver Broncos. We have one more thing to talk about on today's show, Trey Lance and how he's gearing up for a very special and very important offseason this year in preseason, and how that could dictate maybe the future of the Dallas Cowboys at that position if all the chips fall where I anticipate them to. Stick around and find out more on Trey Lance and the Dallas Cowboys quarterback situation right after this break. Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. To touch on the last segment on today's episode, Trey Lance and what's going on with him in the Dallas Cowboys. Well, to give a little bit of background now on Trey Lance, and maybe a lot of people aren't familiar with him, is because he really hasn't played at all throughout his NFL career. He was traded to the Dallas Cowboys right before Dallas's last preseason game last offseason. Without consulting Mike McCarthy, Jerry Jones made that trade. So that is something worth mentioning there, because he got hurt in week 2 of that 2022 season, where he was projected to be that starting quarterback for the 49ers and really get his opportunity there. He got hurt, and that never came into fruition. Then they discovered Brock Purdy, and he really just took over that role and really just pushed Trey Lance out, because there was no room now really for Trey Lance to try and fit in there and get into a whole quarterback battle. I think the 49ers were pretty much set on Brock Purdy being their quarterback. So the timing of the trade and the timing of him getting hurt really, crippled Trey Lance, just because he missed out on that. His opportunity, it was his in 2022 to be that starting quarterback for the 49ers. Then, unfortunately, he got hurt, and now in that timing of getting hurt, it was a pretty severe injury. So by the time he got traded and rehabbed from that injury, it was the last preseason game, like I mentioned, for the Cowboys. So he really didn't get a lot of time to learn the playbook and try and maybe impress people in the offseason last year. So he really just rode the pine a lot, or the majority of the whole season last year. And now heading into 2024 and this offseason, he has now had more time, and all that time on the sidelines last year to learn the playbook, get acclimated to it, really know the ins and outs of it. And now, starting in March or April, wherever he started training, he really got a full off season of really executing these plays, going out there and practicing this, going through the entirety of Phase 1, OTAs, and just voluntary workouts with the Dallas Cowboys now, where he is projected to be the quarterback 3 right now at this point where it stands on the depth chart. But he really hasn't just been given a chance at all yet in the NFL, which is crazy because he was drafted back in 2021 and still up to this point, almost 3 years later, we haven't seen him play more than maybe 2 games in a row in the NFL in the regular season. So now gets to be a good opportunity for a good amount of reasons. But before I touch on those, Mike McCarthy commented on Trey Lance at OTAs last Wednesday and basically discussed Trey Lance's journey through San Francisco to now and how he views it and how he views Trey Lance. He said, "My point is he's crossing that threshold and I've been very, very pleased. The athletic ability is top-notch. We've adjusted some of the things in his motion. I don't want to get into the specifics of that, but you can see the improvement in timing in young quarterbacks, and he's no different." And then he went on to say that he needs more repetition, and the crucial thing on this topic is that Mike McCarthy said that Trey Lance will take a large part of the preseason reps by design and as discussed with Trey Lance, because that has usually been Mike McCarthy's MO. In all the time that McCarthy has been there, Dak Prescott has never played a preseason game under Mike McCarthy, so that'll just give Trey Lance a greater chance to prove himself and show anybody what he can do out there on an NFL field. Like I mentioned last offseason, he got traded right before the last game of the offseason, so no real chance to do it there. Now he's probably going to start in every game this year of all the 3 games that they have in the preseason, so it is pretty exciting from that point to finally see where Trey Lance is in his career and how much better he has gotten through all of these times just riding the bench for the 49ers or for the Dallas Cowboys. And Dak Prescott was also asked about it, and he said all the right things, encouraging Trey Lance and getting more repetitions, praising the growth that he has seen in Trey Lance, in his confidence, and also looking forward to just having Trey Lance push him to be better was one of the biggest things in this quarterback room where they have Cooper Rush as well. He's listed as the number 2 ranked quarterback, so Trey Lance honestly has a lot of work to do. But what is interesting now is, based on all these factors, the main question is Trey Lance the best option that the Dallas Cowboys have in the post-Dak Prescott era? I don't think it's too fast-forwarded to start having this discussion right now because of the actions we've seen. No developments in the contract negotiations with Dak Prescott. This could in all honesty, be the last season we have with the Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott being linked together. He could move on in 2025 if no contract extension is reached. Of course, as a free agent, he could still re-sign with the Cowboys, but it is likely that another team will offer him a lot more money, and if he takes it, he's gone, and now you're left with Cooper Rush and Trey Lance. So is Trey Lance the best option post-Dak Prescott? I think based on all the factors, I think the answer has to be yes. Trey Lance is the best option because you still really don't know a lot about him. Now, that might seem contradictory, but you're going to see a good amount of him in the preseason, and I know the preseason isn't the regular season, obviously, much less the playoffs, but I think you already know you have in Cooper Rush. He has started when Dak Prescott has gotten hurt. Nobody knows what Trey Lance is probably going to look like. You have an idea, but in all honesty, nobody knows what Trey Lance is going to look like out there on the field with this whole new group of people and talent that he has around him. Maybe he surprises a lot of people. The most likely outcome is that he might not, just because also the Cowboys don't have an enormous amount of talent on the wide receiver position or the running back position. It wasn't going to be a great look for Dak Prescott with these pieces around him, much less also now Trey Lance. But I think with the circumstances that the Dallas Cowboys find themselves in, it is probably the best option because I honestly don't expect him to play at all this year. So he could have a whole nother offseason to really prepare and maybe be that quarterback one for the Dallas Cowboys in 2025. So you don't know what you have in Trey Lance right now, but I think that could be a good thing and a bad thing, like I mentioned. Surprising a lot of people and also just being a lot cheaper than Dak Prescott would obviously give the Dallas Cowboys another opportunity to go out in free agency maybe next year and get a lot more pieces. And also, in the discussion of choosing Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, or Micah Parsons, if you do just accept the loss here and take your L and decide that, you just can't afford Dak Prescott and make that decision already, it gives you more time to re-sign CD and re-sign Micah Parsons and ensure that those guys are going to be on the team to help your young quarterback, potentially in Trey Lance, and you don't have to juggle with all these uncertain factors heading into a whole another offseason and be late to the party yet again. So I know I'm talking a lot in advance right now and projecting a lot, but it is a serious question that I think, based on how the Dallas Cowboys have handled this whole situation, is a valid conversation to now start having, because we just don't know what Trey Lance is going to look like. In the preseason, we're going to get a better idea, and it isn't like the Cowboys to go out and just get another starting caliber quarterback. I think they'll settle with Trey Lance if he wows them, if he doesn't wow them, and it'll just be maybe a transition period based on how he plays. But at the end of the day, I think you just have to accept it now at this point. Trey Lance is probably the best option that the Cowboys have at the quarterback situation after Dak Prescott, but I'm sure they won't obviously admit that right now, but it is something worth noting right now heading into a very crucial 2024 season for the Cowboys and how everything plays out and how different it could look in 2025 if the chips fall where they may. But a lot still yet to be played out and executed, but that is the conversation that is starting to be had right now, I believe. But with that, we will leave that there, and that'll be it for today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Thank you guys all for tuning in, and as a reminder, please like, follow, and subscribe to the show as well, and also checking out us on other social medias like Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok for more of this network's content. If you want to see more of me and this show, check out the GSMC Sports Network channel and the GSMC Podcast Network channel on YouTube for YouTube Shorts that are posted daily. Full live recorded episodes are all found on both of those channels, and individual segment videos. If you don't have time to rewatch a whole episode, the individual segments are all on there on both channels. And as a reminder, please remember to tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more football conversations and topics around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiegue, as your host. Thanking you guys once again, and I hope to see you guys all back here again, joining me tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.